Welcome to the Etheria TechCast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today we are joined by Simon Copsey, a delivery and transformation consultant to senior leaders, helping them unwind complex obstacles in weeks, not years, so that happier staff can deliver better software to customers sooner. His career has taken him from working in the trenches across the full software lifecycle to helping leaders find pragmatic solutions to complex problems using the scientific method and modern management theory. So, Simon, welcome to the show. I am excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Ezekiel. Lovely to be with you.
All right, so let's dive in. Your career evolved from focusing on what was on the screen to what was happening behind the screen, the human systems. So, what was the pivotal moment or frustration that made you shift your focus from code to organizational dynamics?
Geez, that's a lovely wording. That's lovely wording. Thank you, Ezekiel. Oh, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think. I think it was my mentor, Noah Cantor. So when I first started consulting, I met a wonderful guy, Noah Cantor. And he said,
Mm,
look, Simon, if you want to work with me, I need you to read this book. And it was The Goal by Goldratt. And so I read it. And I don't think I fully understood it. But then I joined him on a consulting engagement and he started to help me. We used some tools that help you start to see things differently, help to help you to map out a system visually and understand when something happens, why. So similar to when a doctor's treating a patient, you have symptoms, but you need to work out where the symptoms are coming from. So you work backwards and say, okay, well, what's causing that? And then you kind of slowly work back through this chain to the underlying cause. And the thing that he took me through is similar in organizations. I'd previously thought if there was high attrition, well, people are leaving. So what? But then he said, well, you need to ask why. Kind of keep questioning. You'll generally find all these things come back. So I think, yeah, it was meeting this wonderful guy, Noah, that helped me see things differently.
fantastic. So you talk about the scientific method to diagnose organization obstacles. For the engineers and data-minded listeners, what does
Yeah.
that process actually look like in practice?
That's a good question. Thank you. And for the request for it to be simplified. Yeah. So similar to what I said, right? So if we look at an organization, generally at any given point, there's things that are going on that people don't really want to be doing. There's symptoms. It's like a patient, right? And what we do is we then work backwards to understand, and generally with any natural natural phenomenon, or when you go to the doctor as a patient, all the things that you tend to see at once tend to come from just a few underlying causes. So similar in organizations, what we do is we try and keep tracing back the symptoms or the effects back down to the underlying causes. And generally there's just one or two at any one point. But that becomes a hypothesis. You can't, like with a human patient, you can't see the ailment. You can't just, doctor can't see the underlying cause of problems. We now have MRI, we now have CAT scans, so you can start to see these things. But still, there's a lot of things that you have to diagnose on good faith, a hypothesis. And similar in organizations, a lot of the things that cause the problems you can't directly see. They're generally assumptions in the minds of managers that cause them to behave in a particular way in particular circumstances. But the reason why people behave the way they do in organizations is not something you can just directly see. You can't see them walking down set routes or anything like that. So a diagnosis of an organization trying to speculate why things are happening the way they are is a hypothesis in itself. And then you use that to say, okay, well, let's believe that to be true. Let's try
Mm,
something, see if it responds in the way we expect. If it doesn't, then that thing that we thought to be true is wrong. Like if you go to the doctor and he gives you something and then you don't respond to that medicine in the way he thought, he's like, oh, no, my diagnosis is wrong. So
mm,
that kind of approach, what comes up for you?
great. So, Simon, you help leaders unwind complex obstacles in weeks, not years. So, can you share an example of a common, deeply rooted organizational dysfunction that often looks incredibly complex, but has a surprisingly straightforward and pragmatic solution.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So one of the more recent ones was part of an organization that I was very fortunate to work with. We were seeing things like work piling up. Um, we were seeing staff not volunteering to help with the work. We were seeing attrition. We were seeing projects slowing down. We were seeing growing technical debt. So engineers having to take shortcuts to get things through the door. And we were looking and wondering, where's this coming from? All these things, you generally treat in isolation. You'd say, if people are leaving, let's do a quiz and work out why people are leaving, or give them a retention bonus or something. And you do that for each of these things. But what we did was we treated them all as symptoms and said, okay, if those are the symptoms, where they're coming from. And we went back and we kept asking why as we talked to people. And what we found was that there was, in that area of the organization, there was no agreed and understood goal. What that meant was that when work came in that area of the organization, they couldn't prioritize. So what that meant was that generally lots of work was running in parallel. We couldn't say no. So there was lots of work running in parallel. And with only so many staff, all those staff were multitasking like mad to try and get things done. There was a lot of new staff that had come in, which meant that they didn't have the skills necessary, and they couldn't learn the skills necessary because everyone else, all their existing colleagues, were so busy to teach them. And so they were hesitating to volunteer for work, not because they didn't want to do work, but because they wanted to do a good job and they needed the skills to do a good job. And the attrition was because people were just so busy multitasking, which is very stressful and leads to burnout, especially if you don't or can do, especially if you're not able to pursue learning in the way that you want. And delivery was slowed down because so many people were splitting their time across so many different things that any one thing took much longer to do. And so all these things were coming from that. It's very simple once you get to the bottom of things. So we could set a goal, and then that would allow us to prioritize work, say no, not multitask as much, give people room to learn, give confidence to people to volunteer, and the whole problem unwinds very quickly.
Fantastic. So, Simon, you wrote, and I quote, technology is necessary but not sufficient for transformation. So, I'd like to ask, what is the element that is most often missing when a company invests in the latest tools and methodologies but still fails to transform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, the way I look at technology, and this actually comes from my mentor, Noah, is that technology solidifies process. So what technology is really good at giving you is it gives you efficiency. It helps you do what you're doing with less effort. But in doing so, it solidifies it. It makes it much harder to change. It cements it. So it's really easy to change a paper-based system, a paper-based process overnight. We know how difficult it is to change a technology-based system. It can take years, but that's what technology does. So technology isn't a solution in itself, but it can help bring efficiencies. So generally, before we cement any process, we need to make sure it's fit for purpose, which means we need to understand what is the problem that we're trying to solve. So whilst technology has a place to play, and a very, very important one, we first need to understand it's not going to give us the solution in itself. Often if we're not getting the results we're looking for, we need to ask why that is, fix the process, and then if we want more efficiency, then cement it with technology. But technology in itself is a particular tool for a particular job.
So, yeah, that's pretty insightful. Simon, has there ever been a time where you failed as a manager? And also, what did that experience teach you about the gap between theoretical management and the messy reality of actually leading people?
Ooh. That's good. Okay. There's two questions. I need to try and not forget the second one. Okay. You might need to remind me, Ezekiel. So where I failed was, I was maybe about 10 years ago. I first became a manager. And, I think when you become a manager, it depends on your personality type, but for my personality type, what I did was, how to put it. So I've become a parent. It's probably easier for me to talk about that because it's very similar in a way. And not because staff are kids or kids are staff, but the problem's quite similar in that both are about helping others succeed rather than helping yourself succeed, which is typically
Yeah.
what you do up until as an individual contributor. When you become a manager, you're no longer there to help yourself succeed. You have to help your team succeed. And that's a huge switch. And if you don't realize there's a switch there, which I didn't, you do something maybe like what I did, which is you micromanage. You realize that it's all on you think that it's all on your shoulders. You think the only way of intervening is by telling people what to do. But the problem is that you're not them. So you don't understand the problems they're facing, and you don't understand, and you can't control them. If you do try to control them, you waste their creativity, you waste their initiative, you burn out as your team gets bigger or your family gets bigger, if we're talking about parenting. And they probably won't listen anyway. So what you need to learn to do is kind of work indirectly. You need to work out how to create the conditions for them to succeed, as opposed to directly trying to control the situation they're in, which is very, very difficult, particularly as a parent. So that's how I felt. I was micromanaging because I was like, they're not doing what I told them to do. Why aren't they doing what I told them to do? I should tell them harder. And that doesn't work. And if it does, it doesn't work for long. In terms of reality, the reality is that people are smart, people are good, people do the right thing. That people do the best with what they know.
Mm.
And generally, I think, as Deming says, 94% of the time when we fail, it's not because of the people, it's because of the organization, how it's structured, how it's set up. Everyone's good, everyone's really trying hard, but it's the organization that gets inadvertently in the way of its stuff. And so as a manager, what we need to be looking out for is kind of almost be a lighthouse and looking for how is our organization preventing our staff from doing a good job. As kids and as parents and as managers, our job is to get out of the way and help other things get out of the way of our staff. And that's what I didn't appreciate.
All right. So I am curious about your theory that parenting and management are similar challenges. So what is a key lesson from being a parent that you've directly applied to helping a team leader manage a stressful, high pressure or high stakes project?
I think it's be curious before furious. So
Mm.
I'm trying to still apply this as a parent, which is that people do things for a reason. People are rational. Even kids are rational and seeking to understand before being understood. So the world is too complicated, too complex for any of us to understand. Our head tries to simulate it to try and simplify it through assumptions for us to be able to keep up. But we'll never understand the world fully. And what
Mm.
that means is that other people will see things I don't, and I'll see things that they don't. We all understand different parts of the whole. And that leads to conflicts often because we see things differently. And the only way of resolving those conflicts, the only way is by understanding the other person's view first and putting the puzzle pieces together. And then you say, oh, so that's why you did that. I didn't realize that was the case. So a lot of parenting, I think, and a lot of managing is about recognizing that you don't understand everything and you never will. People are doing things for a reason, and you need to first understand what they see that you don't. And then you have a piece of the puzzle that you can put together, understand the whole, and then you can together work together against the problem rather than seeing them as the problem. A lot of what I say, if it ever sounds good, comes from other people. It comes from Eli Goldratt, Akol, Deming. Anything I say that doesn't sound good, it's me, just to offer credit where credit's due.
All right. So let's talk about the theory of constraint. How do you help leaders identify the single most impactful constraints in their delivery system, especially when everything feels like a bottleneck?
Yeah. So, I mean, in one word, it's asking why. Yeah, asking why. But to expand on that, it's similar to what we discussed at the very beginning. When you asked for an example, and we talked about delivery slowing down, no agreed goal meant everything was a priority, etc. So generally, the first place you want to start is understand the goal, and this comes from Eli Schragenheim. That if you don't have a goal, if an organization, if productivity in an organization is progress towards a goal, if you don't have a goal, you can't be productive. People will run in different directions. So we first need to work out what is the goal that we're working towards. What is the thing we're trying to maximize towards affinity, optimize for? If we don't know what we're optimizing for, we won't optimize for anything, or some optimize for everything. So first we need to be clear on the goal. Then we need to work out what's standing in the way between us and the goal. Those are the symptoms, the things that are slowing us down. And they, as we discussed, tend to come from just one thing at any one time, or just a few things at any one time. So we diagnose the symptoms that are getting in the way of us getting towards our goal, and then we treat the underlying cause. And that may be, similar to what we discussed. But the best place to begin is asking why. Why is delivery slowing down? Why are people leaving our organization? Why is everything on fire? And the more times we ask why, the closer we get to the problem, the underlying problem. that's causing all the fires.
All right, that was really insightful and interesting to know. So moving forward, for say for example, a technical professional who is transitioning into a leadership or management role, what is the first mindset shift you think that they need to make to be effective on this new role they are embarking on?
Yeah, no, Ezekiel, I'm glad you asked that explicitly. I think it's similar to what we talked about before, but it's worth underlining that. If you're becoming a manager, just knowing firstly what your role is. If you're now a people manager and it's now recognizing your role's transition into amplifying impact of others. The role is no longer about you being successful, or you can frame it as you being successful is about making other people successful. And once you see that, you realize that everything you've done before is not going to, what you've done to succeed in the past wouldn't help you help others succeed in the future. You now need to work out what are the organizational rules that are getting in the way of my staff achieving or getting closer towards their goal? And that's where your focus is. It's no longer about trying to chip away the work yourself.
All right. So, Simon, looking at the future of software delivery, what is an emerging organizational or management practice that you believe will become as fundamental as Agile is today?
The honest answer is I don't know. But let me expand on that to see if there's something interesting that we can find together. So I think the one thing that changes a lot is solutions, right? We see Agile, we see DevOps, we see AI, we see all these things emerging, and they're pretty dynamic, programming languages, lots of new things emerging. What tends to remain fairly static, I believe, are problems. Problems tend to exist over longer periods of time and tend to be things that are shared amongst different organizations. The organization I was in wasn't the only one that suffered from not having a clear and understood goal. Many organizations have that, sadly. Particularly in the public sector, it's much harder for governments, for areas of the government to have a clear goal because they're not profit driven. It's hard. It's not easy. All these managers, all these people are smart. It's not that. It's not easy to run organizations. So I think I'm less interested in the solutions because they're changing all the time, and that's great. There's more tools coming up. What I'm more interested in is why so many of the same problems keep happening in many different organizations, and they're fairly static. So, for example, high work in process, keeping everyone busy, maximizing utilization of everyone is still believed to be the best way of getting things done and getting the maximum throughput, the most things done in a smaller period of time. But it's not true. But these common management beliefs, I think, misassumptions that are getting in the way and causing things, and they're unfortunately constant. And those are the things I'd like to shift. So, sorry, you said what is the next big solution? I'm saying we still got the same problems, and those are the things that I'm kind of focused on because solutions will always change, and that's great. Means we have more at our fingertips, but there's still the same problems that we need to solve about how organizations run.
Really great analysis and a fantastic response there. So, if you could get every senior leader to stop doing one common but counterproductive practice today, what would it be?
Good one. So I think we've talked about having a clear and understood goal that teams can work towards together, to cooperate towards together. We talked about reducing work in process if people are multitasking. So we've already talked about those two, so I can't necessarily use those. I think there's fundamental attribution bias is another one that I was very guilty of, which is when someone doesn't behave as you expect or achieve the results you're hoping for, you blame them as opposed to the situation. And conversely, when you don't achieve the results that you promised you'd achieve, you blame the environment, the setting, the context, as opposed to it being you. It's just bad luck. And that's quite dangerous because it means that when, as a manager, if you look at your staff and they're not achieving the things you expect, it's very easy to go to blame first. I guess we talked about be curious before furious, right? This is another kind of side to it. So I think and Deming said that, as we discussed, that generally in organizations, when something goes wrong, it's not the people. Use works very hard to hire those people. They come through all those interviews. Generally, it's not them. They want to do a good job. We just need to get out of the way. So I think the additional thing to be explicit is probably when something doesn't go right and it looks like it's a person, it's probably not the person. So I think Marco, a friend of mine, he puts it really well. He says, be soft on people and hard on systems.
Mm.
Because if you keep asking why, if you keep saying, well, why did you delete the database? Why did you do this? You probably realize that your organization is flawed. And if you fix that, you can prevent other people making the same mistake.
Wow, wow, wow. That was an interesting one there. Very, very interesting. So, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around innovation. So, for that reason, I like to reserve one question on innovation for every guest we have a conversation together on this podcast. So, in your work, which applies systemic, almost engineering like thinking to the fluid world of human organizations, what does the word innovation truly mean to you?
So I guess I'm going to cheat a little bit. I believe ACOG defines invention as creating something new and innovation applying it to a new context. So for example, the iPhone wasn't inventive, but it was
Mm,
greatly innovative. All the things in the iPhone pre-existed. You had multi-touch, you had cameras, you had GPS. All these things existed, right? It wasn't inventive, but it was innovative. It was hugely innovative. Like you took it and put it in a phone, right?
yeah,
Or Apple put it in a phone. So for me, innovation is applying something that has been done before, but somewhere else.
great one there. Great one there. That was a really cool perspective to put things into. So finally, Simon, for our listeners who want to better understand and uproot organizational dysfunction. So where can they go to, get your resources, learn more about your strategies, your framework, and maybe perhaps just connect with you and ask questions?
I appreciate it. Thanks, Ezekiel. So best place to find me is curiouscoffee.club, not .com. I should have taken .com, but it's not. It's curiouscoffee.club. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
All right. So I'll be sure to link your LinkedIn profile and your website link to the show notes of this podcast. So, all right, Simon, it's been a truly insightful and interesting conversation with you, and I'm honored to have you on the show today.
I'm honored to be with you, Ezekiel. Thank you for the insightful questions that, as you can see, made me think. Thank you very much.